A terrifying zombie virus spreads through Florida, and its infection rate is alarmingly fast, quickly sweeping across the entire United States. Infected individuals become bloodthirsty and violent. In an attempt to control the outbreak, the government deploys a large number of drones to patrol the area. If anyone is found outside their quarantine zone or venturing out without permission, the drones will immediately execute them on site. However, during the quarantine, there are no food supplies, and some people risk going outside to search for food. A young couple, panic-stricken, runs up a mountain, with the sound of drones buzzing in the distance. Soon, the woman can no longer keep up, collapsing on the ground, coughing up blood. It's clear that she has been infected by the zombie virus. The man tries to pull her along, but the woman pushes him away, signaling for him to go on without her. Understanding her message, the man hesitates briefly before deciding to run alone. But just a few steps into his escape, the woman is struck by a crossbow bolt. He turns back to look, but in the next moment, on the other side, David is quarantined in a wooden cabin on the mountain. It's been over 6 months since he was told that he was an asymptomatic carrier. During this time, he has to undergo blood draws regularly for research purposes. To keep his blood healthy, David has set up numerous alarms and follows a strict daily schedule, eating on time, working out, and checking his eyes for abnormalities before going to bed. At 11 p.m. every night, he must draw some fresh blood, which he then places at a designated spot the next day, under the watchful eyes of drones. In return, David doesn't need to go out for supplies. The drones will deliver food to him on a regular basis. Day by day, David lives out this monotonous routine. The only thing that keeps him going is his daily video calls with his girlfriend, Sam. Sam is a healthcare worker, and she's been encouraging David to hang in there. She tells him that once they extract the antibodies from his blood, this viral disaster will end, and they'll be able to reunite soon. After ending the video call with Sam, David pulled out a phone book. In fact, he had been trying to contact the outside world to understand the situation. Ever since being quarantined on this mountain, David had essentially been cut off from society. He had no idea whether the outside was safe, so he'd been randomly dialing numbers in the phone book, hoping for some kind of response. But no one ever answered. However, one day, while David was checking his health like usual, the phone in his room suddenly rang on its own. David rushed over to answer it, and on the other end was a stranger named Todd. Todd told David that the outside world was a complete mess now. The city was no longer the thriving place it once was. Food shortages had driven the survivors into conflict with each other. Todd hadn't eaten in days, and he wanted to come to David for help, but David refused. He explained that he was an asymptomatic carrier and was in quarantine, so no one was allowed to come near him. To David's surprise, upon hearing this, Todd asked if David had ever been tested. He mentioned that he had never heard of an asymptomatic carrier and wondered if David was even infected at all. This struck David deeply. He paused. For the first time, he began to doubt his own situation. The next day, when David went out to exchange supplies, he took the chance to sneak past the drones. He found a residential house and managed to get hold of a test kit. Following the instructions, he dropped his blood sample into a test tube. Just as he was doing this, there was a sudden noise outside, and David tensed up. The sky was already beginning to darken, and Sam had warned him never to go out at night. David decided not to waste any more time. He grabbed the test tube and planned to head back to his shelter. But as he was making his way, an unexpected danger arose. While passing a lake, a zombie suddenly appeared behind him. The creature gritted its teeth and charged at him. David turned to run, but in his panic, he slipped and fell into the water with a splash. With the zombie closing in, ready to strike, a crossbow bolt suddenly shot through the air, taking the zombie down. David turned around and saw a figure in a hazmat suit. The person quickly drew a compound bow and fired another crossbow bolt, hitting the zombie in the head just as it was getting back on its feet. David was absolutely terrified. He didn't engage with the person in the hazmat suit, but instead grabbed whatever he could and ran straight home. Once back in his shelter, David remained on edge, fearing that the person in the hazmat suit might follow him. He spent the rest of the night in a state of anxiety, unsure of what to expect. The next day, everything seemed to return to normal. The drones were still monitoring him outside. His wife continued their daily video calls, and David stuck to his routine, working out and sticking to the strict schedule. But when evening came and David went to draw more blood, something caught his attention. He remembered the test tube in his backpack. To his surprise, the color of the blood sample had changed to blue, indicating that he wasn't infected after all. David stared at the result in shock and confusion. Then, it hit him. In a burst of anger, he grabbed an axe and smashed all his alarm clocks to pieces. David realized that it had all been a lie. He wasn't infected, but why had he been isolated? Why had he been forced to draw blood every day for months? That night, David decided to tell his girlfriend, Sam, everything, his suspicions and what had happened with the man in the hazmat suit. He demanded answers, asking her what was really going on. But Sam, as always, used the excuse of military secrets and didn't provide any answers. Instead, she reassured David that the vaccine would be ready soon and that they would finally be able to meet. Looking at Sam, David felt more uncertain than ever. He reluctantly agreed to continue giving blood, but the next day, he began his own plan of action. David quietly grabbed his axe and snuck out. He knew the drones would be delivering supplies regularly, and he figured that by tracking their movements, he could find the location of the people controlling them. So, David carefully followed one of the drones. After passing through a dense forest, he spotted 2 tents ahead. He cautiously approached. As he neared one of the tents, a foul smell wafted from it. David lifted the cloth covering it, revealing a corpse in front of him. The body's mask had a crossbow bolt sticking out of it. Still in shock from what he had just seen, David suddenly heard the sound of a drone overhead. He quickly ducked behind a rock to hide. The man in the yellow hazmat suit appeared, holding a crossbow. He scanned the area but didn't notice anything unusual, so he turned and entered the tent. David cautiously followed behind him. When David lifted the tent flap, he was stunned to see a woman injecting herself with blood from a blood bag. And to his shock, the woman was none other than his girlfriend, Sam. It seemed that she was terrified of the sunlight. The two of them then went back inside the cabin, where David confronted Sam. He demanded to know why she had been lying to him. Sam's response shocked him even more. She explained that there was no cure for the virus. The government had ordered the extermination of all infected individuals, and the chaos had led to the deaths of many innocent people as well. To protect David, Sam had claimed that he was infected, using the excuse of needing him for vaccine research to avoid the government's purge. However, the research required constant surveillance by the government, which is why drones had been monitoring him every day. David had almost believed Sam's explanation and felt deeply for the sacrifices she had made to protect him. But then, as Sam was speaking, she kept glancing at his injured arm. That's when David suddenly realized something wasn't right. He quickly used a blood collection needle to prick Sam's hand, and then locked her in a room. Dropping the blood into a test tube, the reaction was immediate. The red solution in the tube confirmed his worst fear. Sam had already been infected. To further confirm his suspicions, David went to Sam's tent. There, he found a computer with stored videos of Sam. As he watched, he discovered the shocking truth. Sam had been infected all along. However, through her research, she had found that human blood could suppress the virus's effects. The downside? The side effect was an extreme sensitivity to sunlight. Now it all made sense. David understood that the blood he had been providing was not for testing, but for Sam to consume. No wonder she had insisted on him exercising daily. She had been afraid that his blood supply would deteriorate and become useless. The computer also revealed a deeper, darker truth. Sam had made a deal with the government. All of this, including David's role, was part of their experiment. The government's interest wasn't in David's blood. They only wanted to know how long human blood could suppress the virus in Sam. In the tent, David suddenly realized that he hadn't given Sam blood today. Panic surged through him as he quickly opened the camera feed from his room. Sure enough, he saw Sam beginning to transform. David rushed back home, fully aware of how dangerous the situation had become. But his love for Sam had overridden his rational thinking. When he entered the house, he saw that the door had been smashed open, and Sam was nowhere to be found. Frantically, he began searching the house, unaware that Sam had silently appeared behind him. Just as she lunged at him, the sound of an alarm clock going off saved David's life. For a brief moment, Sam regained some semblance of her former self, but it wasn't long before her bloodthirsty instincts took over again. She pounced on him, and in sheer terror, David dashed up the stairs. He ran to the window, throwing open the curtains. Sam, who was terrified of sunlight, immediately fled to a dark corner. David stood there, heartbroken, watching as his beloved wife transformed into a zombie. He desperately wanted to save her. He thought if he could just give her his blood, she might return to her normal self. David had figured it out on the way here. As long as he kept up his exercise regimen and continued giving blood every day, Sam wouldn't turn into a zombie. They could still live together. As David picked up the fork to draw blood, the sun outside was just about to be covered by dark clouds. In an instant, Sam pounced on him, her mouth making a clicking sound, looking at his suffering girlfriend. David, caught up in his love for her, didn't want to fight back. He gave in and stopped struggling, letting Sam bite down into his shoulder. As Sam drank his blood, her awareness slowly began to return. She realized what she had done to David, and her face filled with sorrow and guilt. Sam couldn't bear this half-human, half-zombie existence any longer. Taking advantage of David's momentary weakness, she left him behind and stepped into the sunlight. The moment the sunlight touched her, her body began to burn. David, struggling and weak, crawled toward her lifeless body. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, unwilling to let go. At that moment, a swarm of drones appeared in the sky. Soon after, David's body started to change. He realized that he had been infected. Not wanting to become a creature that feared the sunlight, he decided to dig a hole and bury himself. As David lay in the hole, preparing to die, the sunlight suddenly hit his body. The searing pain he felt reminded him of the fight for survival, and in the end, his instinct to live won out. But the story didn't end there. Soon, Todd, who had received David's message, arrived. Seeing the stockpile of food inside the house, Todd was grateful for David's help. Just then, an alarm went off, and Todd sat down in front of the computer. To his surprise, the person on the screen was David, except now, he had taken on the name Dr. Chambers and was now a healthcare worker. David, or rather Dr. Chambers, told Todd that he had found a cure. In order to develop a vaccine for the zombie virus, he needed Todd's blood. As a symptom-free infected person, we can start working on a treatment for you right away. In the shelves to your left, you'll find phlebotomy equipment, tools to collect samples of your blood. You're safe now.